The void stares back. The credits are rolling, the mics are recording. Gaze into the void with your hosts, Josh and Joey, as they discuss thoughts and questions surrounding visual, written, and interactive media steeped in cosmic horror.
Welcome everyone to The Void Stares Back. I'm Josh.
And I'm Joey.
This is a podcast about asking questions.
Yeah, watching content that asks questions or, reveals itself to have something deeper that it doesn't bother explaining.
Yep.
So that we can explain it because we're geniuses.
Oh, yeah. We're experts.
Of something. We haven't figured it out yet, but we got to be experts at something at this point. Yeah, we've been doing this for a while. We just watched Arrival, a movie that came out at some point in the past.
I believe it was here. I've got the case here.
I don't know the dates of all this stuff.
Let's be professional about this.
What do you think? We're just sitting on a couch, hardly professional.
It was released in 2016, directed by Denis Villeneuve, who some of you may also know as the director of Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That movie's great.
Yeah, I got to start watching more of this guy's stuff.
Apparently. Yeah.
Starring Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner. It's a movie about...
It's got some other people in it, too.
Forrest Whitaker. There's another guy I recognize, don't remember his name, but
he's... that, a bureaucratic dude?
Yeah, he's in Boardwalk Empire. It's where I know him from, but I know he's done other stuff. He's getting pretty famous by this point, so...
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, dude, for not knowing your name.
I didn't know any of these people's names, so it's fine. Josh is the movie guy. But on that note, this is the first one that I had seen previous that he hasn't.
It's true.
And I needed him to see it.
Breaking fresh ground.
Yeah, we'll see exactly how well it fits to our format here. I think there's enough here for sure. We
generally focus on the more cosmic horror aspect of the media we consume, but...
This sort of touches on some of those things without taking that approach, I think.
Yeah. The horror itself is not really there.
It's not present. It's not a horror movie at all.
No, not even remotely. But
I mean, it has a little bit of that going on, the cosmic horror, but not necessarily the scary elements that come up, like fear and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it presents the revelation, but it doesn't really present the horror that mankind tends to be overcome within that revelation.
Yeah, I guess it's like a smaller step as opposed to a grander step. Before we get into it, go watch it and come back and listen.
Yeah, because we're going to spoil the crap out of this.
Yeah, so. every element that we can remember.
Yep.
We just literally stopped watching it and turned the mics on. So,
as is the formula for this cast.
Yeah, someday we'll have a succinct introduction that tells you all of that in one smooth, easy to digest sentence, but for now you get 4 minutes of rambling. I guess what'd you think first off, just general impressions?
Oh, it was excellent.
Yeah? You really liked it?
Yeah, as we usually do, let's get the quote unquote less important stuff out of the way. The cinematography is gorgeous.
Yeah, like the movie stuff.
It's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
To look at.
It's great.
Yeah, especially the opening shot when they first get to the valley where the ship is in Montana.
Yeah, that helicopter shot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is insane.
It's cool.
It was really, really good.
It's really cool. I want to know
all the stuff in this movie, all the
that
shots
particular location too. I want to know where that is.
Yeah, I want to go there. Yeah,
seems
just spend
awesome.
some time in the valley.
It's probably just somebody's farmland.
Seriously, yeah, they get to look at that every day.
Yeah.
The acting on everyone's part, big and small, fantastic.
Yeah.
The sound, editing and soundtrack was really good.
It was cool. Yeah, that one was one of the more traditional ones from this, not from this particular style of movie, but the kinds that we watch for this cast. if you didn't know what you were watching and then you looked at the screen and listened to it for a moment, you'd be like, okay, this is one of those movies.
Yeah.
It had a lot of those, droning sounds that are more spooky and what's the word? Like they build the
they're very ambient.
Ambience, of that sort of expectation.
Really set a mood.
Yeah. One thing in the cinematography I wanted to talk about, because I didn't really understand its implications, but it definitely was a continual thread that ran through the movie, and that's that's perspective shots. And that's probably actually means something in cinematography, so I apologize for what I'm about to say this means to me. But there was at least 5 or 6 shots that started at the ceiling and panned down across a very oriented to the camera plane break. So in her home, it'll cut down.
Yeah, the opening shot.
There's a parallel with the camera plane break in visual from the ceiling to a Windows thing, or from the ceiling to the schoolyard at the university, or when they're in the shell and all the shots start at the ceiling and then pan down. And I didn't know what sort of implication that sort of implies, but it was even at the end. And so the movie almost opens up that way and almost closes that way as well. And so I'm not sure if that's just
my knowledge on that is
continuity
a little bit
thing,
limited.
or if it it was meant to give an impression of some kind, but I didn't really notice it from my previous views of the movie as much as I did today, because since I've seen it before, I got your perspective that you usually have on these movies, where you get to look at other stuff and know the major beats of the movie to see what else is lurking in the in the finer details.
Yeah, that shot, that use of the camera is used in a lot of movies.
I was gonna say it's not super common to go down.
No, but I mean,
I see the pan up shots a lot. They start at the floor. Usually they're isolated on people walking, or just tight shots of feet, and then they'll lose pace with whoever they're following.
Yeah, they pull back and
then pan up.
Yeah,
as a continuous shot.
I've seen it from the top down a number of times too, and it's almost always an establishing shot like that of whatever the.
These ones felt like they lingered a lot. Though.
They do.
They spent a lot of time on the ceiling, nothing, right? And then they're oh, okay, we're here.
Yeah.
And it's it was just interesting. I wasn't sure.
I wonder if it's just
what the implication there is. Or
I wonder if they linger, because a lot of the lingering ones were, especially the 2 specifically in her home.
Yeah.
She's giving exposition over the top of that.
Yeah.
And now they don't start out immediately with dialogue, right? But the dialogue does start while it's still panning across the ceiling. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if that was just intentional to give time for that setup exposition.
There was no exposition over the school one.
There wasn't. No, that's what I mean. Just it was specifically her home was those 2. But I don't know what implications it has throughout the rest of the movie. So
yeah. The other cinematography thing that they did a lot, and by a lot I mean through the entire movie, and it's important to the theming or not the theming, but important to the plot points that this movie tackles, was the very, very, very narrow plane of focus the entire movie is shot in, or the post-blooming that they did later, whichever it is. I imagine it's better to do it on site instead of post for that sort of thing.
You just choose your focal plane and go with that instead.
And they use that as a visual representation of memory throughout the whole thing, where you're not meant to know who the people are in the shadow, and and usually in movies that's, I think, I don't want to speak like I know, because I don't, but I would feel like that's a tool for highlighting who's important in the shot, right?
Yeah.
Like there was a shot in here where it was used for that purpose once, I think it was the only one, where she's evacuating the school with everyone. Yeah. And they use it to highlight her in the crowd.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's really obvious who I'm meant to be looking at.
Yep. That shallow depth of field.
Yeah. But in a lot of shots that are room shots, tight, really close shots, she walks in and she doesn't know who these people are, and they're all blurry.
Yeah.
And she is in focus.
Right.
Ian, is that his name? Yeah, Ian's in focus, and then the general is in focus, and then that's it. And then later, as she keeps interacting with them, they're in focus now, and like that was a thing in the entire movie.
It's really subtle, but it's really clever.
Yeah.
It's a great storytelling device.
Well, especially considering you don't really know that that's what the movie's about.
No.
Until it's about it.
Yeah.
You know, until it's at the end and you're like, oh, okay. And then like those moments have passed already, but they already had the effect on the you know, the unknown viewer, you know, when you're but a babe in the woods.
Yep.
So that was super cool. Don't really think there was anything else super specific that I...
There's definitely a shift in color palette between her, you know, quote unquote memories of her daughter and the life
there's like a timeline that they establish, right? Like, so all the shots with her daughter are bright for the most part.
Yeah, they're very, very warm toned colors, and everything that's happening in the present is very cool and muted.
Yeah. Well, they also, and I'm curious on how you, like, at what moment you realized what was going on before the movie tells you, because that's the only gripe I have with the movie, and they don't do it in dialogue, which is great. I'm glad they didn't. They do it with the montage at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But they explain a lot of that.
Yeah.
By saying, like, here it is. Isn't that clever? Yeah. They unfortunately don't say, like, and then she, you know, there's no narrative that directly says it. There's just a bunch of visuals that show you. So you feel like have been given credit for making the connection. But I'm curious at what point you were either aware or like maybe what impression you have of those early visions.
I knew when the daughter drew the image.
When she showed the parakeet thing with the parents.
Yeah, when she said, "Mommy and Daddy talk to animals," I was like, "Oh, I got it now."
Yeah, that's pretty late in the movie. Oh,
it is.
It's like past halfway, I think, somewhere around there.
It is. It's around that mark, yeah. But there still wasn't a lot of information before then.
Yeah, that's why I was curious what your impression was of those shots, like what you thought they were meant to be. Because the way that they frame the movie, which this is the reason I really like it, is that all that stuff, because you get to know really early that she went through some shit.
Yeah.
So your timeline of the movie, when you start watching it, is everything that we get to see has already happened, and now she's just a single, widowed.
Yeah.
I don't know what the term is for someone who's lost their child. Like, widow would be lost her husband.
Right.
But she's divorced, assumably. Yeah. Her child has passed, and now she's a teacher in this college teaching Portuguese.
Yeah.
Or the language or something, right?
Yeah.
When that's the past. Like, she hasn't had the kid yet.
Yeah.
And the kid hasn't died yet. But we're given the narrative that it had already happened.
Right.
And her personality and her acting in those scenes conveys someone who's more somber.
Yes.
Which we piece together to mean that she's just a sad woman from all this stuff that's happened to her.
Right. Which is...
when it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. It's not the case. Yeah.
So, I was just curious how you thought about those, like that, all that stuff.
I mean, they had me believing that.
Yeah, me too.
For a
that
long time.
Yeah.
So,
it was very effective.
Yeah,
the way they did it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. It's almost like too effective. Like, it's like, now that you've seen it, it's like, oh man, like, of course, how could I have been so dumb? But like,
I mean, not really.
No, I know, but I mean, like, it was so well done that it really wasn't hiding anything. It was right there for you, but
it was a lot like an Edgar Wright movie, but not comedy.
Sure,
because all of his movies are like mirrors, where the first half parallels the latter half in terms of the writing or the beats or the jokes.
Yeah.
And in this, it was like integrated into the theme, right? Like, like we talked about Annihilation in this movie. I'll talk about that in a sec, but there's a lot of similarities in storytelling choices that both had, and I feel very similar about moments that both movies cut away to show you an event in the past and like what that means and
how it ties to the present and
why it's occurring and that sort of stuff. And
I got that same vibe too.
I was gonna say that well before we watched this, but I was like, maybe that's kind of spoilery. I don't want to tell him that it's like Annihilation. in that regard, so I never did. But it fits well into the cyclical nature of what the movie becomes about, right? Like they're talking about, time and how it's happening all at once for these aliens, these fourth dimensional beings or whatever they are, and then it's happening to her, right? And as she spends more time in their presence, it happens more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice framework for the movie to also follow.
It is.
I also don't really know if Edgar Wright's, if all of his movies are like that. I haven't seen his entire filmography, but a lot of them seem to be.
I have not either.
And I love it. I like his writing and directing style in that regard. I think he's super incredible at it.
Yeah, very much so. Getting to the creature-y stuff for a moment here, because there's obviously the most important stuff about this film has nothing to do with that.
Sure, yeah. So there's some sweet aliens in the movie.
Yeah, and we
get to see them, which is cool.
Yeah, I knew the whole time that what we were seeing was not the full thing.
Yeah,
and I was like, when do we get to see the?
What made you feel that way?
I could just feel like
just the way they were shot and framed. And,
and like they look like hands.
Sure.
They don't look like full-bodied things, and they're always like the caps of them, what we think are the tops.
Yeah.
For most of the movie, like very much just fade.
Yeah.
Into the clouds, and I'm like, all right, there's more here.
Yeah.
And I honestly,
do you think it was the same creature?
There was at one point where I thought maybe it's two hands.
Yeah.
And
it's like a big fucking thing.
Yeah, and then. But that thought was pretty fleeting. I was like, no, I feel like it's probably two things, but they're just not showing us everything,
Yeah. Well, especially when they did the scenes, like that was pretty dispelled when like they squid away.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
So
yeah, but I liked the creature design.
Yeah, I like the reveal of the full thing because it's really silly in like the kind of way that you're like, why would anything look like that? And it's like, well, you don't get to decide what aliens look like,
right?
Yeah. and it goes on further than it looks like it would. Yeah. And then it's like this giant silhouetted thing. And it's like terrifying.
Yeah, it's really ominous.
Yeah. It's got no features.
Yeah.
Like the features that it had where they thought the face originally was seemed more defined as a face than their
just
human
like,
head
it's
shaped
really
things.
Just like knuckles.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No, it was cool creature design. And I liked that it was mostly featureless.
Yeah.
That's one of the smaller things that ties into, that unknown and
for sure
more cosmic horror-y. Like they were kind of indescribable.
Yeah.
If you tried to describe that to someone else, you wouldn't be able to give them much.
Yeah.
So I really, really appreciated that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there was to stay on the creature's visuals real quick. I kind of wish there was a bit more of it, but I was very satisfied with the dream sequence.
Yeah.
Being like the very light, big toe dip in the pool of a spooky scene.
Oh, where she turns and it's like
and then the sound goes crazy and it's huge in the entire room.
Yeah, filling up that tiny little.
I just love that she talks to it so frankly, and because we don't know who she's talking to yet, and the camera pans and it's a fucking heptapod.
That was really
she wakes
great.
Up, it was sweet.
Yeah, I wanted maybe just one or two more.
Yeah, just a little bit more.
That'd been fantastic. Because I feel like that too would be something that would be a little more frequent.
Maybe
and maybe not.
Yeah. Maybe so.
Again, it's one of those things like we don't know. We don't get to decide that. So
it was also perhaps it probably happened a lot. It was just like
this was our window into.
We just got to see one of them.
Yeah. This is happening to people probably.
Yeah. It's sweet.
Yeah. It was very cool.
What the fuck what is Ian doing? Like, what is he there for? Like they brought him in and he ended up just being
mathematics, man.
Yeah, he's like, do your math. And it's like, it's not useful until the end. And then it's like, you get to be the prop for the lady.
Yeah,
what was her name?
Louise.
Louise, right?
Yeah.
You get to
You're
be
the
Louise's prop for
Yeah.
when she wants to show an action,
Yeah.
like walking or whatever.
Right.
It's kind of funny. I guess he did other stuff, I'm sure, when he was talking to the other scientists on the
Right.
around the country. But it was just kind of funny how superfluous Ian ended up being.
Yeah, I really was hoping for more.
At least on screen, right? Like they showed us her perspective the whole time, which is relevant.
They did, yeah, and the story is definitely her story more than anything else to tell. But I do wish that we had gotten more of a science angle.
Sure,
using it he was there. He was a great vehicle for it. That was his
they-
literal purpose.
Well, yeah,
And-
they spent like 3 scenes just saying like, you're useless here, Ian. Your knowledge means nothing.
yeah,
And they're like, when they jumped onto the ship, and he's just like, fuck.
Yeah,
like,
right.
and, like
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
back and tripping all over himself and like,
Right.
realizing that things shouldn't work this way, and how he's just out of his element. And they're
yeah,
like, science won't help you here. It's not about that, And
right.
it's just interesting.
I do like that we go from almost immediately language isn't the cornerstone of humanity. It's
Science is,
science,
yeah.
and then science is flipped on its head. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That was really great.
Yeah, nice. I didn't really put that together, but yeah, it ended up being pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. How do you want to approach this topic here?
How do you feel about the language choice? Like the writers / directors' choice to use their form of communication as it is, ink rings or whatever you want to call it.
The visual
How do you
style of it?
do you have any thoughts?
I mean,
about
it's cool.
that?
Super cool.
Yeah.
As an idea, and it's definitely a relatively useful vehicle to bridge the gap of the science fiction of it, right? Like, if you want to get across the idea that this is strange, it's like when people come up with languages for movies, like Dothraki and that sort of stuff. Like, how do you truly take it out of the realm of human languages? You don't.
Yeah.
No conlangs in media are, at least successful ones, I should say. I'm sure there's some out there. I don't want to speak out of turn on that regard, but none of the popularized ones, none of the successful ones that people can speak today, real, spoken members, they have tons and tons of similarities to real languages.
Yeah.
What generally happens is people who develop these conlangs cherry pick elements from many different languages.
Right.
So there'll be like an Arabic pronunciation of a vowel sound that gets, dumped into it. But also, this particular dialect and this thing and then that thing.
Yep.
And then the way that they write is a combination of things instead of it, because it's difficult to just go to somebody and say, think of something that you've never thought of.
Right,
think of something that's never been done.
Yeah.
This sort of stuff is sort of, they use the movie as a vehicle to sort of deliver that gap that couldn't have been bridged realistically,
Right.
to suggest that they actually made up a language that ended up working this way, maybe any more than it needed to for the movie, right? Because there's like a few scenes where she's highlighting points of articulation in each sphere, and they're all like 135 deep. Like every single sphere has like 135 unique elements about it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot.
Yeah.
To suggest that goes into any given symbol or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It was cool. I like it.
Yeah.
I wish they did more with the audio. Not that that's an easy thing to do, right? Like logistically for the purpose of it.
I will say I
I was
waiting
curious
for that.
about it.
Mm-hmm. I kept waiting for them to dive into that a little bit more as well, because that's the first thing that she's presented with, right? Is audio,
just the sound of them.
and then that's one of the first things she's focusing on when she gets to the camp. Like, they get the ring, but she's also sitting there just listening, right?
Yeah.
To the audio.
Sorry about that.
And I was like, I kept waiting for them to like kind of dissect that a bit more. And
Sure, yeah.
after, I guess she's focused on that, and then she writes the word human, and they give her the ring.
Right.
And then that's it. The audio's done. We don't even bother with that anymore.
Yeah.
For the rest of the entire movie.
Right.
And which is,
I mean, they do talk about it. They take a point to say they aren't related.
Yes. Yeah, he does say it. Yeah, I remember that little montage where they start talking about all the things that they have discovered, and
that they're not causally linked, just like many languages are.
Right. But it would have been nice for them to hash out both sides a little bit.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing, right? Like the idea that the heptapods, come to Earth and they introduce their language to it, right? And understanding the language inherently gives the speaker, I don't know, the person who's understanding it, a true understanding of how time works.
Yeah.
It opens time, as they said, and this where there's the magic gap, right? Like it's a little bit magical.
Yes.
And there's a couple elements about that we'll get into in a sec, but that just the idea of that is, it's interesting as if, so yeah, we talked about how the sound is different, right? But it could be the case that this circular, what do they call it? Nonlinear orthography.
Mm-hmm.
It's, as her book is titled, The Universal Language, which is just more or less a clever book title. But I think there's some level of truth in that, right? Like perhaps the language we hear isn't that language; it's their language, and the language of, the writing, is its own secondary thing, which it wouldn't help for them to communicate to us, through audio.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That's obviously not what they came for.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Obviously, that's just a guess. They could both be the same language.
Yeah.
But that would be my guess to play devil's advocate to that perhaps it could be that they're not the same.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's totally viable. I don't have any holes to poke in that theory whatsoever. So.
Because it's interesting, because if you think about it, this universal term, this universal language, isn't equipped to, like many languages aren't, at first, to have symbols for minutia, right? Just like in today's society, there are languages that don't have words for certain ideas.
Sure, yeah.
And perhaps the universal language isn't capable of saying an apple fell from a tree, because apples and trees are intrinsic to what we understand them to be, and perhaps they don't exist, outside of Earth or whatever, wherever this language is relevant. And perhaps the language itself is an ambiguous language that talks about home and purpose and
higher
general concepts.
Higher concepts.
Yeah, and their spoken one could be that bridge, right? It could be interesting that even human language could develop to something similar, where there's, we talk about how a global language is slowly developing, and it's looking like it's English right now, close second to Chinese, but I think that's just due to population.
Yeah.
Because Chinese schools heavily teach English, so they're sort of adopting that as the future to some extent, conceding that that's the case. It's also the language of science.
Yeah.
And, in the global science community, that's all the papers are written in English and that sort of thing. Or published in them in the big publications.
Right.
So it's interesting that it could be the case that someday we all write a way and speak another.
Yeah, that is very true.
Like a unified, unspecific way.
I was originally thinking that when they made the little rings, when they started writing, that it was a 3-dimensional.
Yeah, it wasn't just a plane. It was like a glob.
Well, no. So like, because it is like because they show us some different angles of it. So it's in 3 dimensions.
Right.
I thought it was a sound wave.
Right.
And that like when they started analyzing and she was like putting points on it and stuff, like it was going to be very similar to the way we, interpret dolphin language or something like that. Like where she was listening to it. Because again, she started focusing on the audio.
Yeah.
Then we got the few rings and they tried to start dissecting that. And I thought it was going to be like almost like a sonogram or something. And,
sure. Yeah.
That's it. That was the end of that thought. It was
just, I mean, they even had like a couple shots of computer graphics where they unwound it.
Yeah.
Yep. And then they played it flat.
Yep.
Or they wrote it flat. Or more flat. So just to illustrate that they were like maybe thinking on similar terms or trying to fit it into their understanding of the way language works on the planet as we know it. Yeah, no, I think the language is fascinating, for sure. It's cool. I don't know if this is like an original idea, because at the end it credits
a book. Yeah,
a book. I don't know that it's like 1-to-1 the same story.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know anything about the original book. I didn't do any research after watching this the first couple times, because I'm like that. No, I just don't seek out written stuff. But it's definitely cool, and I've never heard of a thing like it prior to watching this. So
yeah,
I imagine it's a made-up thing for the story.
I would assume so. Yeah,
it's cool.
It's very cool. How do you feel about time travel, Joey?
What do you mean? There's no time travel in this.
You're right.
I have lots of feelings about time travel, Josh.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have time.
How do you feel about time not being linear and their representation of that here?
So they didn't really represent that here to be the case. They talk about how their view of time isn't linear. Not that it isn't linear innately, right? And we get firsthand, we get to watch it, right? The whole movie is us watching that, where Louise just spends the whole time seeing the future and the past, and mostly the future, which is interesting.
Yes.
Maybe we can talk on that in a second. But yeah, she spends most of it seeing it, and just living in it from her perspective. Like she just is there.
Yeah.
Because she has these moments where she just goes like, and she's out of it, right?
Yeah, she kind of either just zones out or she kind of doubles over.
Yeah, and all of the shots are meant to illustrate that it's happening on both sides, right? Like the framing of the shot and where she is in each one is often similar
in some way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in the new shots that were taken of these memories of the future, she takes a moment to recalibrate to her current life and the memories that she has from that point, and knows who Hannah is and knows the past leading up to that point, but it isn't relevant to the interaction she's having at that moment, except that she needed to remember that this thing happened for something in the past.
Right. I really liked the audio cues for that as well, because
like for when it would occur.
You'd get little bits of dialogue that were happening in that memory of the future
during visuals
of the present, and then all of a sudden it would cut. And
the book one's my favorite.
And she has the moment where, like you said, she is all of a sudden kind of calibrating.
She's in both. Yeah, she's like gradienting over.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, the book one's my favorite audio piece that they did between this shift, when she's reading the book about planets or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's just like working and all I hear is like,
yes,
like the page turn.
Yes, it was expertly done.
Yeah, the audio mixing places the sound behind her.
Yes.
Which is really cool. Mm-hmm. It was really cool. Super awesome. Good job, whoever did that. Whatever team, I'm sure. It wasn't one person.
Yeah.
But super great. So we do enter, because this is bound to have some level of conversation about time travel. We do enter into the realm of paradox when we talk about events of the future affecting the events of the past.
Right.
So the way that we're told the story, okay, I don't really know how to frame this a good way, so I'm just going to say it all, and hopefully it'll end up making sense when we're done. But one example is like a big plot point at the end, right? Which is the Chinese general.
I was going to say, this is probably the biggest one,
It's the most obvious one, yeah. Because it's the one that directly is using that tool as a tool.
Yes.
It's no longer happenstance that it's occurring. It's like someone else is understanding how it works at some very basic level.
Yeah.
And knowing that this is relevant to how it'll all come down to work.
Yeah.
But in the future, after the heptapods have left, long left.
Yep.
She has some sort of a banquet during what appears to be a coalition of all of the countries coming together in some facet or another. I'm not sure exactly how that's not important to the story, but she's at this banquet, well dressed, and then the Chinese general,
Yeah.
whatever his rank exactly was, approaches her in a suit and tells her something that she uses in the past.
Yeah.
So she learns about something in the future that she uses in the past. And that's the way that we're fed the information. That's just inherently impossible. That's just a paradox, right? It's like saying, I'll worry about that later. I'll go back and change something later. Like the idea that I'm going to build a time machine and change something that happened in the past.
Yeah.
That's the impression that those chain of events have. But this didn't do that. This did those things at the same time.
Right.
Which is how you break that, because it did happen in the past and the future at the right moments in relation to each other.
Yeah.
And there was no physical time travel. Right? It wasn't a moment where it's like, I saw myself.
Yeah, right.
But I didn't see myself the first time.
Right.
None of that happened.
She just exists in both.
Yeah. She is basic. What we get to see here in this movie is what Dr. Manhattan goes through in 0.2 seconds in Watchmen, right?
Yeah.
He becomes Dr. Manhattan in a freak accident. Well, we won't get into that because that's a little ludicrous already, but he becomes aware of all of time as he perceives it, past, future, present, as coexisting. And he talks about it very vaguely in the whole thing, but this is what he's talking about.
Right.
He's making decisions about the future from the future knowledge that he would have later in the present.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff. And it works in Dr. Manhattan well. He's not breaking any of these rules I'm talking about.
Right.
It all makes enough sense.
If you haven't read Watchmen, go read Watchmen.
Yeah, and also watch the movie because it's also good, but don't expect it to be the same. It's a little different.
It's like frame for frame the same thing until, spoilers, the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean it's a really true interpretation of the feeling of the whole thing, even if they did make changes. So I would watch it. Both versions are great.
Yes, they are. Which is a rare happenstance in this day and age.
For sure. I think it's the only one.
Yeah.
that did it that well. Anyways.
Yes, I agree.
At least the only one I can think of. But yeah, so this didn't really break any of those rules, even though it sort of frames itself as if it is doing that.
Right. It dabbles, and then it's like, haha.
And I think the only reason that
it out.
Fooled you.
Yeah.
I think the only reason that it appears that way is just due to people not understanding those concepts innately, right? Like you look at that happening and you go like, oh, that must not be the case. And it's like, well, have you thought about it until just now? Because this is a really deep thing to try and figure out in one scene of a movie before the camera cuts, So it never bothered me. I could see it potentially bothering somebody as like a weird, it's like, oh, it's kind of a mute plot hole, like they had to fix a thing, and it's like to tie everything together he had to tell her, it might have the impression that could make somebody sad, but it really is doing everything right. And I think the people who wrote it would know that it could give the impression off that it was lazy or strange or a cop out of some kind, but it really isn't. It's very true to how I believe time to operate, especially when you get into the realm of manipulating things in different time, different points in time.
Right.
Because then you get dark waters. Usually people who don't understand that will want to write about it. Start, then later during, they start writing, then during their writing realize things are getting a little dirty, and they have to clean it up without truly understanding what they were trying to tell, the story for.
Yeah, I appreciated that the universal language was a circle as well, and it wasn't read front to back, when this is also talking about time and not being linear.
Yeah.
It's...
Yeah, and the movie frames itself really, or like paces itself for us knowing that very well too, right? Like we know it's a circle the whole time, but we don't really know why.
Yeah.
And then later we learn that they see time differently.
Yep.
And then, and then very, very shortly after that, because this is all climaxing at this point, the viewer learning things starts to like speed up at that point, when it's like, oh, time is repeated so many times in this big thing that they send us at the very last time that they have a session. And then, them all piecing the puzzle of what the weapon means and that sort of stuff. And so yeah, they do a really good job of sort of delivering the relevance of it being a circle, all at the same time of the relevance of basically everything in the movie coming to a close at the same moment, which is really satisfying.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing I appreciate being in the dark about.
Right.
For the period of time that it keeps you there. But yeah, didn't go too deeply into time travel there, but I do like the way that they handled it for sure.
Yeah. I just wanted your take, because I really, really liked it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how many times we've truly talked about the way I feel about time, other than me setting up a couple examples here and there of the way I
don't think too often on here.
No, not on the cast. I don't think we've done it really at all on here.
Yeah.
But me and you have had short little conversations about it.
A number of bursts about it. But.
Yeah. And like I think like a lot of the ways people incorporate time into time travel and manipulation into their stories is totally valid. Like I don't want to sound too uppity, even though it totally is uppity of me to feel this way. But I enjoy plenty of stories that say time travel's magic. They just tell you it's just magic. Like magic is operating this. And I'm like, okay, I'll believe that. You tell me that you're not trying to say science.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna suspend my disbelief. I'm here to watch a fucking cool movie about time travel. Like, I don't need it to be what I deem to be the scientific, order of operations that time travel should take. Like if one of my favorite game series is about time travel. I don't really think it's a great game series, but it's very fascinating, which is the Prince of Persia series, the original trilogy. And you just basically say it's magic. Like you kill yourself in the story. Spoiler alert. Like, you can't do that. You can't kill your past self. It doesn't work that way. And then they're like, don't worry, you got a magic thing that lets you do it. And it's like, all right, cool, carry on. Yeah. And like, so it's fine as long as you frame it. As long as you know what you're telling the story for, right?
Right.
Because there's also there's three. I think there's three core ones, right? There's magic, as I just described, where you just have some usually religious connective logic behind it. So like in Prince of Persia, there's like a deity that is a police officer for people who break time and has to go out and kill them to write the timeline.
Yeah.
Don't know how that works. It's not important to the game, so you don't get a whole lot of backstory about the Dahaka. But the Dahaka is not a fictional thing, from what I understand.
Yeah.
It doesn't really do that in real life, but it's kind of a religious-based thing.
Yes.
Where there's somebody who's in charge of understanding it, controlling it. Hence why there is mystical items that allow you to travel through time and that sort of stuff. Totally cool with that. That's one, magic. The second one is, there's two sciencey ones. And the first is the multi-dimension theory, right? Like you travel back and you kill yourself and it's fine because you killed yourself in another timeline, another dimension.
Right.
When you time travel, you're not actually traveling back in your own dimension.
Right.
You're traveling into a parallel dimension.
Think Rick and Morty,
Exactly. Yeah. Like a infinite Ricks, infinite Mortys, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
That's to me uninteresting storytelling.
Yeah.
Unless you lean into it like Rick and Morty does, where there's infinite Ricks and infinite Mortys, and that matters as a plot point. Like they're really leaning into it. It's also an episode-based show, which thrives on you being able to just show up in any dimension and the setting be different for the purposes of that episode story.
Yeah.
And how it's not relevant to the overarching thing at all.
Yeah.
Whenever you want. But as like a standoff one movie, real lazy, because it's often a cop-out for why did that work? Oh, they're in another dimension. They killed a different version of themselves or whatever. Like, I don't know. And then the really complicated one is the one that I think is interesting storytelling if you can do it. And Arrival did it. Obviously didn't delve really deeply into it.
Yeah.
But that's where it's the same dimension. To believe that there are infinite dimensions is totally reasonable. Not unreasonable. But the idea that a time machine has the power and energy to travel from one to another and expect to end up in the same place when you do that, and everything to line up is just ludicrously complicated.
Yeah.
That it's just sort of silly to me. But the one where you're traveling in the same suggests that if anything appears to be you changing the past, it's only a perspective trick, right? So if I'm the one who's going back in time, it's going to seem like I'm going back in time to change stuff because I'm seeing it from one perspective, which is mine. I get in my machine, I turn it on, and I show up at 1982 or whatever the fuck, and I get struck by lightning. I don't know. Back to the Future. I don't know when that's all said. Anyway, but if I go back, it's going to seem like I'm making choices and I'm affecting the world. But then when I zoom out to a third-party observer and I get to watch my little self run around on the timeline, it's all happening on the timeline. It all happened.
Yeah.
Like if I go back and I meet myself, that shouldn't ever be a surprise. And if it's framed as a surprise, they didn't do their homework or they're leaning on the crutch of it's another dimension. Because if, surprise, if Josh here builds a time machine 10 years from now and promises me right now that he'll punch me in the face the moment and I'll accept that. I want you, if you come up with a time machine, I want you to walk through that door right now and you punch me.
Okay.
10 years from now.
All right.
Guess what? It didn't happen. That's so strange. It's so weird. Oh, it's so crazy. But if he had done that,
Joey, what's that?
So yeah, if I go back to meet myself, I would have known that that's coming up.
Right.
I would have already encountered that experience. I would have met myself.
Yeah.
Like in 2 seconds, I get punched by Josh, and then later I grow up and Josh calls me 10 years from now and he's like, "Oh, I did it. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna punch you so fucking hard, Joey." And I'm like, "Oh, I know, I was there." and it's just gonna happen. It's just gonna be a state in time that can be observed from a third party. But to Josh, it could
it's
be
a meaningful choice, right?
It might feel meaningful at the time, or if a movie is staged where they start following you after we've had this conversation, the viewer of that movie may not be privy to the knowledge that it's already happened. You saw yourself come in and punch me. Yeah, I know it happened.
And I was punched.
Yeah, and all that stuff would have happened. But movies are often framed as that's a surprise, right?
Yeah.
Like, or they tell you can't meet yourself. It's a paradox. I'm like, no, it isn't. Yeah, it's only a paradox, quote unquote, if you never met yourself the first time. Yeah, and if you never met yourself the first time, you just physically can't. You're literally going through the motions. Yeah, people don't like this theory because it implies a lot about other theories that people have about philosophical concepts, which is to say destiny.
Sure, yeah.
It means you don't have choice. It's just a secondary thing that says everything you do is what you're always gonna do. Yeah. And that's difficult to be okay with, right? Like people like the idea that they can have free will and choose things and feel like the choices they have are making a difference. And they are. But once you've chosen something, it's not as if you weren't going to choose that. It's like saying, hindsight's 20/20. I'm like, so is foresight. Yeah. We just don't have it. Like Louise does. She even talks about it. She's like, if you could see your future, would you change anything? Yeah. And then he makes some like silly romantic thing.
Yeah, he's like, I'd express how I feel more.
Yeah, and that's sad to her because she knows the future, where it's clear that he didn't do that, to some extent. Like it's right. Implying that didn't really, happen well enough, or when it did happen, it was catastrophic.
Much. I was gonna say it was too much, yeah.
And so it's a whole thing, but people don't like the implications that come along with that, to accept it as something that they believe about the potential of time travel or how time works just generally. Because I just believe this day to day. Like it's not something that is like it's not conditional. It's not. I'm not saying if time travel exists, then Destiny does. Then Destiny sort of does.
Sure.
It's not an if. I just think that that's how it actually works. That the choices I make, and I don't have to like live in that and be like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
I guess I'll walk in the street, and if I would have gotten run over, it's bound to happen. Like I don't necessarily alter my life
I'd
that
come
way.
over and have iced coffee and record a podcast.
Yeah, I don't
with
pretend
Josh
to
today.
know the future. I'm just saying that when it happens, I'm not. There's no ifs. I'm not really. I don't get caught up in what if, as a result, which is possibly a good thing. Maybe the only good thing from believing this about the universe. But that's sort of the short version of that, and it was pretty long. So, I think it's really, really cool, and I fucking love things that do it well.
Yeah.
And they're incredible. And I don't know if we'll watch it, because I've talked to him about it and how I would love for us to both be blind on this movie, but I don't think it's going to fit into the show, because this almost doesn't, this movie.
Yeah.
It's pretty close
it's
to
on
not.
the cusp.
Yeah. And time is definitely something that's relevant to, the Lovecraftian thing when you when you boil it down to this sort of level as well.
A lot of his stuff just breaks down. Well, and any of the writers that contributed to the mythos is, are always breaking down reality and what does that mean.
And our first movie from the cast is like that, right?
Yeah, Annihilation.
Yeah, where we don't know how much time passed between the scenes that we get, because all of a sudden everything's different when the camera cuts. And time is seriously put in question.
Yes.
And like they talk about how long people were in the bubble in that movie, and they're like,
one of the very first things that's said in the movie is, you were in there for 4 months or whatever.
And it's like,
she's like, oh, it's only a few days.
What? Yeah, and it's like, oh shit, and that's sweet. Yeah. That's super cool. So it's not truly out of the realm, but it definitely doesn't go as hard as it could if it wanted to be that kind of movie, which it's just not that kind of movie.
Yeah. So what's the one that you're questioning?
Primer.
Oh, you've mentioned this before. Yeah.
Primer is like an indie film, I guess, low budget thing, and all I know about it, and hopefully this isn't spoilers. If you're worried about spoilers for Primer, go watch it before I say this, because I haven't seen it, so I don't even know what I'm saying. But basically, the time machine in that is a box, and it operates in a different way in that I think it can only go in one direction, this box, but you have to spend an equal amount of time in the box to travel. So if you want to go back in time, you got to stay in the box.
Oh, okay.
Which is the machine. But it also operates under this idea that I'm describing, where time is of this rule set. And the idea is that it fixes it. It fixes those issues for the storytelling, because you were in the box. You're not going to run into yourself. Things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I don't really know. I haven't watched it. I don't know what it's about. All I've heard is somebody vaguely describe it.
It's
not having just watched it. Like, they watched it a while ago.
Yeah.
And they're like, you should check this movie out. I thought it was pretty good. I'm like, okay, cool. And I just haven't, because I'm not a movie watcher. But if you've seen it, dear listeners, let us know if we should see it.
Yeah.
Like if you think it fits this.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I'll really go out of my way to watch it in my real life outside of this anytime soon. If I do, and it works, then you'll see it as an episode someday. But if you can expedite that process, let us know if it fits, because I really want to watch it. And the same goes for Looper and things like that. Like, I haven't seen Looper, and I understand that they do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, I own Looper. Yeah. So it definitely does not fit for this. But,
right, that's what I was saying.
We should watch it sometime. I think you'd like it.
Cool. Yeah, and in that respect, Primer definitely doesn't fit this, I don't think. It's just, if you're interested in time travel, we'll see those two movies, because I haven't seen either, and I've heard that they do the idea I just described justice. So if you want another look into the deep intricacies of writing that kind of a story and keeping all your ducks in a row for that, then
that's cool.
Those do a good job of that.
Neat stuff.
Yeah, I thought a lot about this. Good stuff.
Anything else specific you wanted to touch on for this?
There was a thing. How did you feel about Luis's ability to affect the ink in two scenes? where she gets to the glass and then she does it with him,
right,
or with it, and then she does it a little bit in the last meeting when she's alone.
Yeah, it felt like she manipulated a little bit less so in the last one.
Well, she was just being talked at on that one.
Yeah.
And also at that point, they understood English just fine.
Yes.
Which is interesting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even like had adopted the names that they gave them, that she gave them. Yeah.
Abbott and Costello.
Yeah. Abbott is in death process.
Yeah.
He's dying.
Did it say in? I thought it just said Abbott is death process.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that the subtitles, by the way, just to touch on that for a second, the subtitles of the rings at the end there were direct English translations and not how the symbols, it's not what the symbols mean.
Yes.
Like when you translate Spanish words like burrito, for example, is little donkey.
Oh, right.
That would be like if the heptapods were Mexican and they said burrito.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom the English said little donkey.
Yeah, Abbott is little donkey or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. As Abbott is death process, when that just means that circle meant Abbott is dead.
Yeah.
Or is dying.
Is dying, yeah. That's how I understood it.
Right. And that's just what that means. And that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that the word is a part of their language. Because is dependent on time.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Is, was, will.
Yeah. Expresses
that's present tense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like our language, has that in it, but theirs shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
It probably should. I just thought it was kind of cheeky.
It is. In answer to your original question, I don't know. I guess I hadn't really thought about it. I really more accepted the fact that they, in that moment, gave her. I gotta be delicate how I phrase this. Not that they exerted will over her to be able to use it, but like that they almost released the ink to be manipulated by her. I don't think that they.
But there's something there, right? Like,
yes.
She can't manipulate that. Like when you go like, hey, write your name. Yeah. But I don't hand you a pen.
Yeah.
Like you're like, well, I need a way to do it, and it's like, what was the way? How did she do it?
Yeah.
Because it's very particular, and she just went like this and just wiped her hand along, right? But left behind shapes.
Yeah.
But it's touching into the next thing that I was going to say about the movie, which is she starts experiencing the ability to see the future before. I don't know if it's directly before she even interacts with them, but before she learns the language.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, she's having those moments,
and she's shaky before she starts like breathing heavy before she even enters the place at all.
Right.
Like, yeah. And it's meant, I think, mostly to sort of, for us to interpret it as perhaps fear or trepidation.
Yeah, I
definitely not that.
It's almost like the start of a panic attack.
Right. But it wasn't that, because she experiences that right before her serious visions as well. Yes. Exact same thing. She's shaky. She's like breathing heavy, and so she's like being
influenced in some way. Yeah.
Like eldritch stuff right there, where she's just like in the presence of the thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, already affecting her.
Right. It's very
and like it's the same
like a
thing.
Dream call.
Yeah, it's the same thing at the end when they send her down the pod.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is, like, she has the vision of the future 20 seconds later.
Yeah.
And then goes and does it.
Yeah.
And like at that point she's already seen quite a lot of the language and like understands it better. Yeah. But yeah, it's just interesting.
Well, and I mean, it's possible too. Like we touched on the creepy dream that she had.
Yeah.
Like I'm wondering, were they there in her head? Like right there, know, like manifesting in some way, rather than her just having a normal human dream about these things.
Right. I mean, it's also interesting to say. So we get a bit of information. So maybe we could touch on this too. to maybe talk a bit more about the heptapods, but during that last meeting, it tells her everything, right? It says in 3,000 years we need humanity's help.
Right.
How can you know the future? Weapon, whatever. Louis sees the future, the whole sequence. But what I found interesting in that scene, having watched it, a number of times at this point, is that implies Costello's the one that's left.
Yeah.
That implies Costello is there, lives till then.
Yeah.
How did Abbott die?
In the present.
Right. Like, what caused that? Was he just older? Did something happen on another site? Did Abbott sacrifice himself to save them at the end? Because one flies away, the other stays to manipulate.
Yeah, Abbott's the one that gives them like the whole map, right? Or whatever it is. All the millions of little rings.
I think it has to be Costello. Or no. Costello leaves the ink that Abbott manipulates.
Yes.
And then the explosion happens and they...
Yeah, because Abbott is the one that like forces them out of the room and as it explodes.
So he's closer to the glass.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, which is why I think he's dying when she goes back and talks to Costello.
Yeah, I never put that together as a thing.
Yeah.
Also, is Abbott and Costello the only aliens on the planet?
Oh, like they jump from ship to ship, maybe?
It's all one ship.
Right. Oh, ooh.
Because they're four-dimensional beings, because I did want to touch on how they leave as well.
Yeah.
I know it sort of was meant to be a visual continuity for the ships sort of dissipating into that smoke that they live in.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff, because like the last one in Montana... Is that where it was?
Yes.
Montana?
Yeah.
The last one in Montana was... it had ink in it. The rest sort of didn't. There was like a black bit of smoke at the bottom of it. And the rest were more like... They look like water vapor.
Yeah.
And I was curious about the scientific implications of that because, not the ink part, but the water vapor, but because if something just disappears, for example, like teleportation, if something just goes and doesn't occupy any space anymore, all the air around it rushes to fill the void.
Yeah.
Right? That would be how that works. So it would be very, very, very loud and destructive and full of force to teleport something in such a literal sense.
Right.
But I sort of interpreted it maybe as they're four-dimensional beings, which is to say, the next dimension, and can phase in and out of this plane.
Sure.
Right? And that was just their way of doing it more safely, because another thing that happens when you create a void like that is energy.
Yeah.
Heat. And you would just make water vapor or steam. Steam and water vapor when you do that.
Right.
So I was curious if that was maybe part of inspiration behind that process, and that it was a slow phasing out. Because we've talked about Flatland before on the show.
Yes.
But if you think about each dimension going up, we start at 2-dimensional. It's just a flat plane, right? Then we move to 3 dimensions, and it's a bunch of flat planes stacked upon each other to make a 3D object.
Yes.
What's 4, right? It's a bunch of 3 stacked on themselves to make the 4 in some way. I can't answer how that works. Exactly.
If you could, we wouldn't be sitting here, Joey.
Well, I don't know about that. I guess we'd be richer probably.
That's what I mean. We would be
I would want to do this cast still. I'm not so jaded.
I just meant on this couch.
We'd have a much nicer couch, is what Josh is saying.
Yes.
Made of money.
Or at least stuffed with it.
The problem is, if I knew that, it'd be difficult for me to explain it scientifically. I would just be a hack who was just like, yeah, I know this.
Right,
and everyone's like, well, write it down in math and science. I'm like,
I can't.
I don't know. I know this means alpha and that means omega, but I don't know what it means to you fucks. But yeah, so the idea that in our 3-dimensional, we're just one of those many stacked 3D objects that represents their experience.
Yep, and they phase from...
And they don't have to move physically in our world to leave our world.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of maybe what I thought that was. Because like they spent a lot of time at the beginning saying, they're not emitting any radio waves, they're not emitting any light waves, no sound, no radiation.
Yep.
Literally nothing is coming from these husks. And it's like, well, they're in a different time and space where I'm sure this is just the docking door of their thing.
Yeah.
Their existence.
That's interesting.
Possibly.
So it could be the same ship. That they're phasing from one stack to another, which is the other ships.
Yeah, the other locations.
Through 4-dimensional space.
Yeah, and so when I said that, I have not done any of this math, but I'm curious to know. Maybe I'll look up, see if there's some fan theories about the thing that go this deep about the movie. But
I'm sure
it was relevant that the ship opens every 18 hours.
Right, and they never touch on that, and I wondered why that was.
And I think there might be some nice math where 18 likes 12 in relation to 24 hours.
Oh, probably.
And so the others open, and they're just meeting these time schedules all around.
Yeah.
Just being at the right window.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, could be interesting. And I'm curious to know if there is perhaps some strange... Because, so a lot of the movies montaged, or we don't get to see some stuff.
Yeah.
During, a lot of time passing when they're studying the language and they've been there for months and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't get to see all the things that happen in there. We get a montage of them teaching them more complicated ideas in English and seeing them recreate them in their language.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious where it learned weapon.
Ooh.
And I'm curious if they learned weapon at a different site.
Probably.
Right? Because they talk about the combative thing, and then weapon shows up and they're confused about it.
Yeah.
They're like, why would they call it weapon? And they spend a lot of time on that. So maybe Abbott and Costello are the only ones on Earth.
It's possible.
And they played shogi like a second ago, and then they come over, or it was mahjong, but they're learning different words and ideas from these other stations, and I don't know, it's curious.
I like that theory, whether or not it's the case, it's different.
But it would make sense. I mean, maybe it's a projection thing, and they don't actually have to move at all to project to each of these locations. And maybe it is different locations, but they literally have to move inches. It's not a globe like it is to us. It's a different, it's like closing space in and on itself for wormhole technology. Like they're changing the distance in our realm by traversing the higher plane, the higher dimension.
Yep.
Between planes.
Yep.
Because that's how wormhole technology is proposed to work. It's basically by building a stable tube in the next dimension between points in ours.
To quote Tim and Eric, you wouldn't want to put the universe in a tube.
Great. I kind of want to. But yeah, so there's a lot of curious things that go like really unanswered in this movie about how...
Yeah, it's great.
How What's-Her-Face is influenced when she's not there. Prior to her even beginning to understand anything about the language.
Right.
Because the whole point of it is like, when you understand it, you get the gift. But she starts getting the gift
long before that.
Yeah. Well before true understanding. Or any understanding, And she also...
It's because time isn't linear. She's already there getting it.
Yeah. No, I got it.
Oh, did you?
It's just curious. It's also curious that she gains aggressive flashbacks when she directly interacts with them.
Yeah.
The first time they do the hand scene, it goes like brrr, and she goes and then has like a vision.
Right.
And it's and that was probably just storytelling for us.
I think so.
But it happened a lot.
Yeah.
Also, back to the cinematography thing. Every time that they enter the husk thing, what do they call it? They call it shell. The shell?
Yeah.
The shot of that hallway that they do the thing is from a different surface each time.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
You get to see them walk on the sides on one of the last few, and then one of them they're walking actually upright, and one of them they're upside down. The first one they're upside down. I love that shot, by the way. That's my favorite shot in the whole movie. When the first time they walk into the room with the window, and they're on the ceiling, like the camera's upside down.
Oh yeah.
So cool. I don't know. I just love that shot.
It was really good. I think my favorite is still the valley, like them entering.
It was cool.
Is
during
so gorgeous
during the shot. and I think we highlight this every time, but we don't talk really during movies. Neither of us just want to do that, really.
Yeah.
But that shot, I asked him if he thought it was a CG shot, and we had like a little discourse about it during the shot.
Yeah.
Because it's so good. But that doesn't happen often for us. We don't usually speak up during the movie.
No,
we just make noises and stare at each other when it happens.
Yeah, we'll let out a chuckle or a gasp or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I laughed when Ian said fuck when he looked back down at the ground from the new perspective that the shell's gravity gave him. Did you feel like the movie, and this is off topic for the cast I suppose, but did you feel like the movie spent too much time on the personal, like obviously it's what it wanted to be, the movie, but the like the relationship,
the mother-daughter relationship, or
even his and hers, and like how it sort of climaxed all at once for what we understood to be the reason the aliens were around, and then it's climbed down from the climax was the love story.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I didn't feel like...
I mean, I enjoyed it. I was just curious if it felt strange, because the whole movie isn't about that until that point.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, this relationship is a love story, and aren't they happy together? Because it was really, really emotional. Like, they skipped the foreplay, so to speak, of setting up that relationship. They had a couple scenes where they were like friendly.
Yeah.
But nothing that was really that serious, other than what we learned later were the flashbacks of them being together. And I guess she was also learning that. She didn't really know who was in those flashbacks, kind of like a dream. Yeah. Until it was relevant to what she needed.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think that it focused too heavily on it. I mean, honestly, like you said, it kind of just comes out of nowhere, but like really comes to a head pretty quickly at the end there. So if anything, they maybe didn't focus on it enough. But I also
that's what I mean, just the way they handled it.
I'm not dissatisfied, because I think it works for the vehicle that it needs to be.
Yeah, the rest of the story that it's telling. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they already very early on show us that there are time gaps, like we just talked about, like, that several months go by and they're doing all this stuff. So we know they've spent a lot of time around each other.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm very happy to just
it wasn't an unbelievable thing necessarily.
No, yeah. I think they told it briefly enough.
I just know that's a thing that people don't like. Where it's
absolutely.
Like a serious movie and then they just throw in a love element, that kind of thing. I was just curious if this felt that way.
No, I kind of felt it coming the whole time.
Sure.
Like, honestly, their very first interaction on the helicopter gave it away to me.
Sure, yeah.
Just the way he looks at her, and I don't know. I was like, oh, that's where this is going to go at some point.
Sure.
And maybe I've just seen too many movies to know.
No, it's definitely a thing. Like, you think that in the movies where they do make the mistakes of doing it poorly.
Right. Yeah.
They still have that opening scene where they look at each other in the helicopter.
Yeah. Right. So
I just thought I'd bring it up because a lot of movie nerds out there harp on that, I think, a lot in some movies where it feels kind of inconsequential that it matters that much, and I get it. Sometimes it's a forced thing that the movie didn't need.
This is why I like Mad Max Fury Road so much too, is that it could have been that and it wasn't.
Yeah.
And
There's just two people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even at the very end, he's like, Max, my name is Max, and he's kind of emotional, but it's not because he likes her. It's just
she's just a human.
She's a human, person. And he needs to save her.
They went through a lot of stuff together.
Yeah. And that's all it needed to be. You know? And I think that more movies could
take cues. Healthy storytelling.
Yep, more movies should take cues from that. But this in particular,
that's like a social thing, though.
Yes, this one in particular did not offend me in any way.
I mean, it's important for a lot of what the story had to tell.
Absolutely, yeah.
That was a thing to some extent. It just they just definitely handled it differently than most movies, I think. And
yes,
once again, it's like a perception thing. Like, if you don't know about time travel, that parts of that might offend you. And if you're already thinking in those terms, looking for those tropes, you're
Yeah.
going to find them here, and you're going to find them at weird times, and it might be dissatisfying. And
Right. Yeah.
cool. I'm glad it didn't. I mean, I knew it didn't disrupt your enjoyment because you already said you liked it, but
Yeah, no, it wasn't, it didn't force me to put much thought into it because it flowed nicely for me, but
Yeah.
I also am here looking for very specific things, and
I think the only thing I was unhappy about with those scenes was that he didn't find it weird when she whispered into his shoulder that she missed out what it felt like to hold him.
I wanted him to react
I was
too.
like, okay, lady.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Exactly.
crazy person.
Yeah.
And maybe we just didn't get to see them have a relationship in those montages that was a bit closer.
Oh, sure.
And there was something there.
Yeah.
But that
Or
hardly
maybe-
seems like the environment.
Or maybe we
could
didn't
be
get
the
to see
It affect him
in
too.
that moment, like he just understands.
But he reacts later. Oh, you just mean that he understands what she's going through?
No. I mean, like he understands everything.
Oh, well then
You
why? It's weird that he has the reaction to the daughter dying. That causes them to break up, and he's still very much grounded in
That's true.
human thought. If
All
he
right.
has trouble with
Yep.
the future, I think
Pew! There's that bullet through the.
there's the hole through the theory.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, like I kind of wanted. That is another thing at the end of the movie. I kind of wanted to see the future of Earth a little bit further, and
Yeah.
how, because they just show you the very, very beginning of her starting to teach the world this language,
Yeah.
and it,
Like preparing, you know.
yeah, well, just learning it, and like I just want to know what it does to the world, to know
Yeah.
just everything, like all at once. The entire world knows everything all at once, all of a sudden, when they all know this language. Or like what happens to the people who don't know, because not everyone's going to learn it at the same time, and like then there's like a weird divide of like class
there's
and
a lot of
understanding and
implications.
culture,
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy implications there. I never even really.
where it's
I
like
didn't even put that.
people
together
just
at the
ascended
end.
all of a sudden,
Yeah.
and then like the rest of the world either has to learn it, catch up, or fear them, or
Right.
or whatever. And she's American, so she's teaching Americans the language. Does that change America's status in the global front and all these things? And like,
Right. Well, and like, yeah,
curious.
because like the general comes up to her and has this moment, tells her. Now, is he telling her because he knows? Because the language is there? Because there's the banner.
he talks about how he doesn't understand. He says he doesn't know how you do what you do, but he
That's
thinks it's
true.
important that you need to know this stuff.
But there's the big banner in the background at the banquet.
yeah,
with
this is
the-
well after.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
that's-
and it's like a banquet of unity, because they just reference it. They don't say what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But that's what it made it seem like it was becoming a global
Right.
government or something like that, or they were coming together more seriously than they ever had before,
Yeah.
having overcome the thing.
I don't know, buddy. Yeah.
It's just interesting. I really want that
We need
that future.
We need like the.
we need the Blade
spiritual-
Runner 2065 of this.
Yeah. I want like a spiritual successor that maybe doesn't have.
I want an animated series.
Oh man,
That'd be sick.
it would.
3,000 years later.
Costello.
Abbott is still within his death process.
Right.
He's still going through it.
Abbott is still death process. I'm gonna use that all the time now.
His death process?
Yeah. I'm like, how you doing today? Josh's death process.
Dying slowly inside.
Oh.
Well, I'm glad you liked the movie at least.
Oh, I loved it.
I think it led to
I'm
enough
gonna
conversation
happily-
for the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got lucky with that.
I will happily watch it again multiple times. There's
cool.
There's a lot to digest here, so.
And a quick note on watching it multiple times, because that reminded me, because when I started, I was like, all right, I'm going to go into this from an analytical perspective instead
Yeah.
of just another happy viewer, since I've seen it a few times now. Well, since I knew it was a lot like Annihilation, I wanted to look at that relationship, and they do a lot of similar camera work in Annihilation,
Yeah,
where things are sort of stuttery at certain moments in the show. Like when they first look down the hallway at the glowing screen,
Yeah.
it's like sort of shifting. Just the highlighted screeny bit.
Really?
It feels as if it jitters a bit in a way that like overlaps what you understood to be the edges of where the hallway ends.
It's interesting.
Like as if when you look at something like that, normally it becomes outlined by the edge of the field of view of the hall end of the hallway, and this had like a bit of a jarry thing that felt like the white was more supernatural, and it would overlap that barrier.
That's
very
interesting.
Very quickly and minutely, just due to I think the camera work, and obviously that was like a CG thing, I'm sure, but there were other shots that were just of people, where it was a little bit like some of the shots in Annihilation, where I was asking you.
Was there a ghost
later
image there,
if there was like a bit of a blur.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a little bit of that, not quite to the extent that I think Annihilation really had, because I felt that in my first watch of Annihilation, and I never noticed that in a previous viewing of Arrival, but it was definitely there occasionally. So that being said, I don't know what implications it has during the timing that it showed up, because I didn't notice anything.
Right.
I don't really think there's too much there. I think it was definitely present during the memories, just to give visual distinction between them. So the shots of her child and stuff like that had a bit of that going on.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we thought during the theory for Annihilation was.
Yes.
Like what was real, what wasn't.
Which who knows what's real in that movie, because she's not even herself when she's telling the story. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and what a fucking great movie.
Yeah.
Annihilation's so good. I don't think it's been topped yet with all the stuff we've watched.
No, probably not.
I think, like, as good as True Detective was, I think I like it far less than I like Annihilation. Yeah. Annihilation is just like my dream movie.
It's really good.
Just all the questions that it doesn't answer. And,
yeah.
And it's kind of like, we kind of did that. I wish our Annihilation episode, to get a little meta here, I wish it was more like our last episode. I'm going to be releasing these in order so that I'm not contradicting myself now, but we just watched A Cure for Wellness before this.
Yeah.
And in the recording of that episode for A Cure for Wellness, during our conversations of it, because it's also one that teetered on not being, like, possibly not exactly lining up with what the show is about as well.
Yeah.
I think they dip in equally with the possibilities of certain things being certain ways.
Yeah.
As pretty close to being, like, similarly close to being appropriate for the topic. But at the end of the episode that we recorded, like not even 5 minutes before we shut it off, I had a new theory. Like, yeah. And, like, I wish that felt like it was opening itself to me more and more as I talked about it in Annihilation, but in that we had those pretty quick. We thought about some weird ones pretty quick.
We did.
And
it's also
they weren't even that weird.
Our longest episode, I think. That conversation was like almost 3 hours.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it was like 2 and some change for sure. Yeah. It's a great movie, man.
It really is.
We're probably gonna have to revisit it at some point.
We should. Yeah.
Just long time down the road. Yeah. It'd be cool once we're, and maybe it'll become a recurring theme where we revisit some of the big classics and see how we feel about them, having done this show for as long as we have at that point or whatever. It's kind of cool.
I'm all for it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting thing when the movie just slowly, like, reveals itself to you like that, or opens up for, like, our discussion opens up for more theories to be had or different perspectives.
Very much so. All right.
This was great.
That's Arrival. At least our initial reactions. Well, my initial reactions, your musings after a couple viewings. So
yeah, it was interesting to get Josh's fresh perspective of a thing.
Yeah, I don't know that I had as much to say.
This one wasn't that deep either.
Off the cuff, as I have in past movies, but also I've watched all the other ones more than once. This is the first time that I,
was Annihilation? You saw that in theaters?
Yeah, I saw Annihilation theaters, and then bought it for us to watch.
Endless was double new, double fresh.
Yeah, that's the only other one. But we both had quite a bit to say about that one. So
Yeah, for sure.
hi, kitty. There's a cat in the back.
But yeah, this is definitely the first one that I knew a lot about.
Yeah.
But like, I'm glad we did it as well because I didn't. When I watched it before, I just took it for what it was and then walked away.
Yeah.
I never really thought about the implications of the things after the movie was done. Like during, I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting, really fascinating, really well done." And then I was just satisfied. I just really enjoyed it, and then walked away and never thought about it deeper. So it's cool to put it under the microscope.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yes. Thank you very much. I don't know what we've got planned next. So,
well, I think it's up to you because this one was my choice.
Sure.
And I sort of interjected it into our list because we've had like a vague list of things for a little while that we hadn't gotten to.
Well,
A Cure for Wellness was also sort of interjected.
It really was.
It wasn't something we've had on the list for a long time. So we're going to let Josh pick at some point soon
Yeah.
what we'll watch next. But yeah, thanks for watching.
Well, I hope they're not watching unless they're 4-dimensional.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for watching us. Thanks for watching that the little waveform. Yeah. Tick by. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time.
Don't stare too long.
Definitely don't this time. Sometimes we say or do, but this one definitely don't stare too long on this one.
Or do.
Doesn't work with no one can read you, man. You're given mixed signals, you know.
There is no life in the void.
I wasn't supposed to actually.
Can that be our outro?
Well, there you go, Abby.
Every time?
That's what it was right there.
What?